on a cold morning in May of 2019. A quiet executive order was signed thousands of miles away, and inside a heavily guarded technology campus in Shenzhen, the emergency lights effectively went on. Within 24 hours, the world's second-largest smartphone manufacturer was stripped of its access to foreign software foundations. No more software updates, no more licensed core systems, no more access to the basic tools that kept hundreds of millions of devices running. To external market analysts, it was an open and shut case. Wall Street tech commentators openly declared that the firm was finished, predicting a complete operational shutdown within months. But deep inside subterranean research laboratories, behind biometric security doors, an elite team of software engineers was unlocked from their routine assignments. They were given a mandate that sounded like suicide to any traditional developer: build a modern operating system from scratch, strip out every single line of foreign-controlled code, and force it to run faster and cleaner than Microsoft Windows. What foreign officials didn't realize was that this wasn't an emergency reaction. It was the triggering of a secret contingency plan that had been quietly waiting in the shadows for nearly a decade. But here is what almost nobody realized. This was never just about saving one company's quarterly earnings. It was the first tactical strike in a quiet geopolitical war to rewrite who controls the digital backbone of the planet. To understand how deep this trap really goes, we first have to look at the invisible monopoly that has governed human civilization for over 30 years. Every time you power on a computer, open a banking application, log into a government portal, or access a power grid control system, you are placing absolute trust in an operating system. For 3 decades, that invisible digital heir has been almost entirely controlled by a single nation. Microsoft Windows became the quiet ruler of the global economy. Running over 80% of all enterprise desktop machines on Earth, it became so dominant, so universal, that governments around the world simply stopped questioning who held the keys to their critical infrastructure. Every business, every hospital, every military command post was effectively borrowing its digital foundation from Silicon Valley. If those systems were ever restricted or patched with a critical kill switch, entire national economies could be paralyzed without a single physical missile being launched. For decades, world leaders accepted this vulnerability as the price of modern convenience. But behind closed doors in Beijing, strategic planners reached a terrifying conclusion. Trusting a potential geopolitical rival with your nation's computing core was not just a security risk. It was sovereign negligence. The real breaking point didn't start with desktop computers. It started with a silent audit conducted deep within national telecom networks. Inside top-level cybersecurity briefings, analysts uncovered a sobering reality. If foreign sanctions could instantly disconnect a global mobile giant from its basic operating software, the exact same mechanism could be used to freeze national power grids, stock exchanges, and government communications overnight. The threat wasn't theoretical anymore. It was actively happening. The order went out immediately. The nation needed absolute software sovereignty, and it needed it before the next geopolitical crisis struck. But building an operating system to rival Windows is widely considered the single hardest engineering challenge in human history. It isn't just about writing code. It's about creating an entire living ecosystem. You need millions of independent software developers to build applications for your system. You need hardware manufacturers to build compatible processors. And you need billions of users to trust an unproven platform. Every single tech giant that attempted this over the last 20 years failed miserably, leaving behind a graveyard of abandoned software projects. Yet, against all economic logic, these engineers were ordered to march straight into the storm. Inside the company's private development hubs, the atmosphere was described as an industrial pressure cooker. Engineers were divided into isolated work groups, forbidden from referencing Western software design patterns to avoid future intellectual property lawsuits. Their first attempts were disastrous. Early builds of the system were sluggish, crashed constantly under basic workloads, and couldn't run standard Office software without throwing fatal system errors. Internally, panic began to set in. Senior developers warned that trying to replace 30 years of accumulated Windows software compatibility in a matter of months was mathematically impossible. If they launched an unstable system to the public, it would destroy whatever corporate reputation they had left. The project was falling apart. Deadlines were missed, and executive leadership faced an excruciating choice. They could quietly abandon the project and pay whatever penalties were demanded to regain foreign licenses, or they could double down on a design gamble so radical. It threatened to shatter the traditional computing industry entirely. That was the exact moment the engineering team made an unexpected decision that shocked the technical community. Instead of building a traditional monolithic operating system, the kind that Windows and macOS have relied on since the 1980s, they threw out the old blueprint completely. Traditional operating systems rely on a massive, complex core engine called a kernel. If a single driver or security layer deep inside that heavy core fails, the entire system collapses into a blue screen of death. The engineers decided to take a massive gamble on an unproven concept called a micro-kernel architecture. They stripped the core down to absolute mathematical essentials, isolating individual processes into independent security bubbles. If one application crashed, the central system didn't even flinch. More importantly, this modular microkernel meant the exact same operating system could run across a tiny smartwatch, an industrial robot, an electric vehicle, and a high-end desktop workstation without changing its fundamental source code. It was an astonishing theoretical breakthrough, but theoretical elegance means nothing if nobody actually uses your software. They needed millions of real-world stress testers, and they needed them immediately. This was where the long preparation phase began, executed with the quiet precision of a military campaign. The rollout didn't start on high-visibility enterprise computers where a system crash could make international headlines. Instead, the system was deployed like a hidden passenger inside consumer smart accessories. Millions of users purchased smartwatches, television screens, and home automation hubs, completely unaware that they were carrying the secret core of a brand new national operating system on their wrists and in their living rooms. With every single automated patch, millions of unwitting users were feeding real-world performance data back to the development hubs. Bugs were identified and patched in real time. Security vulnerabilities were closed, and the microkernel engine was hardened through billions of daily interactions. By the time Western intelligence agencies realized what was happening, the prototype operating system had already accumulated over 300 million active nodes without ever directly confronting Windows on desktop turf. Then came the move that sent shockwaves through Silicon Valley. With the core engine stabilized, the developers unveiled their final, most aggressive transition step, HarmonyOS Next. They took the unprecedented step of completely severing the system's remaining legacy support for foreign application frameworks. It was a complete point of no return. Up until this moment, users could still run legacy applications through background compatibility layers. Now, those crutches were destroyed overnight. The operating system would only run pure, native code written specifically for its own sovereign architecture, to incentivize software developers to rebuild their tools from scratch. Billions of dollars in state-backed grants and corporate funds were poured directly into developer networks. Over 10,000 critical enterprise applications were rewritten in record time. The digital fortress was fully built, isolated, and completely immune to foreign restrictions. And that brings us directly to the present situation, where the real displacement is taking place right before our eyes, across major government ministries, financial institutions, state enterprise headquarters, and military command centers. A massive purge is underway. Millions of desktop computers running legacy Microsoft Windows systems are being physically disconnected from networks, uninstalled, and replaced with native workstations powered by the new sovereign system and open Euler enterprise servers. What was once dismissed by Western critics as a desperate temporary workaround has officially become the non-negotiable standard for the world's second-largest economy. Microsoft, which spent 30 years fighting software piracy and building deep relationships across regional enterprise markets, is watching its market share in the administrative and state sector vanish at an unprecedented rate. Public procurement documents confirm that state-backed entities are explicitly requiring native sovereign operating systems on all new equipment purchases. The domestic market has turned, and the traditional desktop monopoly has officially fractured. But if you think this strategic shift is going to remain contained within national borders, you are missing the much bigger picture. The current situation inside domestic markets is merely the proving ground for a far more aggressive international strategy. For decades, developing nations across Africa, South America, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East have watched foreign sanctions be used as digital leverage. They have seen how a single geopolitical dispute can result in a country being suddenly disconnected from financial messaging networks, cloud storage servers, and critical software updates. To these nations, relying exclusively on Western technology infrastructure feels like building a house on rented land that can be reclaimed at any moment. The architects of this new operating system understand that fear intimately, and they are turning it into their ultimate export advantage. They are not just selling software. They are selling the promise of absolute digital sovereignty. By packaging this sovereign operating system with affordable, high-performance hardware, they are offering developing nations a complete, turnkey alternative to the Western tech stack, a system that cannot be remotely disabled, cannot be monitored by foreign intelligence agencies, and cannot be shut down by overseas trade committees. As entire trade blocs align their digital infrastructure around this alternative ecosystem, the global internet itself will begin to split into two completely isolated technological spheres: a Western digital sphere built on Windows, macOS, and Silicon Valley cloud networks, and an Eastern sovereign sphere powered by micro-kernel architectures, localized chipsets, and state-controlled data corridors. This is the future threat that standard technology channels refuse to talk about. We are not just looking at a simple competition between software brands. We are witnessing the birth of a digital iron curtain. A world where an application written in San Francisco will simply not execute on a computer in Shanghai or Riyadh. A world where security protocols, data privacy rules, and digital communications are completely incompatible across geopolitical lines. If a state-backed alternative can successfully eliminate Microsoft's 30-year monopoly across an entire